Right, thanks for joining us again today, Michelle.
My pleasure.
I think there's a few new people here who haven't joined us before. So Michelle is a personal development coach with a bit of an edge, I'd say. I've worked with Michelle personally and on business stuff for years, really. So Michelle has joined us 5 weeks now, discussing various different topics throughout lockdown, and everyone has found it super helpful. All the previous videos are on YouTube.
Whoever's got the banging going on.
Oh, that's it. There you go.
Thanks.
There you go. So all Michelle's previous sessions are on the YouTube page. So today we were going to kind of go through relationships. One of the things that a lot of people have been asking for a bit of a session on is, you know, obviously we're coming out of lockdown now, but I think relationships for people, you know, not just, you know, romantic relationships, but relationships all over the board have been an issue, I think is fair to say, for a lot of people. So Michelle is gonna talk us through that today.
I am indeed. Thank you very much, Rachel, and thanks everybody for showing up. Good to see you. Some familiar faces and some faces I'm not so familiar with. Looking incredibly glamorous there, JC, sprawled in that beautiful sofa. So normally I completely ad-lib. Today I've gone a little bit different. I have made notes, so I hope you'll forgive me referring back to my notes. I've got a lot of information to impart, and I want to make sure that I don't get off track, because those of you who know me know I get excited and then sort of can veer off a little bit. So why are we talking about relationships today? Well, you probably already know that 42% of marriages, first marriages, result in divorce. What you might not know is the extraordinary numbers of people that are going to the lawyers at the moment has called for the government to change the divorce laws. It's already gone through the House of Lords, so it's pretty much a done deal. And come the end of this month, divorce law will be changing. And that's simply because they won't be able to go through the numbers that are coming through. So I thought, well, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you about relationships, how to make them rock, how to uncouple. We're going to talk about, excuse me, long distance relationships, because I think that we are going to have another lockdown. If we don't have another lockdown now, or, you know, the next few weeks, we almost certainly will with the second phase in September. So I want to give you as much information as I can for you to take into the relationships that you want to invest in, and the relationships you want to remove yourself from. So long distance relationships, we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about coming out of lockdown and how you can use the wisdom in your relationships, healthy versus unhealthy relationships, intimacy versus intensity, love languages, and if you're not familiar with love languages, strap yourself in because it's a game changer, and fun things you can do to aid your twosome. So without further ado, here I go. So I'm Michelle Zelli. I'm a coach. I've been a coach for about 20 years. Before that, I was in corporate, sales director in blue chip, managing director of a large TV company. Before that, I had quite well documented abusive, neglectful childhood that then, of course, allowed me to have lots of wounding, make loads of mistakes, especially in relationships. So I'm qualified not just as a coach to be speaking to you today, but as a woman who has made more mistakes than I've had hot dinners and learnt from them. And I think that's the important thing here. We're not here ever to judge a mistake. Smart people make mistakes, just smart people fail. They just don't keep making the same mistakes, and it's learning from them. And that takes me to one of my favorite couples, and that's Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin. I don't know many people that don't have a bit of a thing for Chris Martin. And they took a lot of stick when they got divorced, and they called it conscious uncoupling. And I'm not sure why they got so much stick, because if everybody was conscious in their coupling and their uncoupling, not only would the world be a better place, but there would be an awful lot of children who weren't suffering from marital wounding. So we're going to talk a lot about consciousness today. So before I go into consciousness, what is it? Consciousness is your level of awareness. And the idea is that as we get older, we get wiser, we become more conscious. In other words, our ability to be aware and what we pay attention to becomes ever more sophisticated. Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the same consciousness as it was created. What does that really mean? It means in order to solve a problem, whether a relationship or any other area, you need to be wiser and more aware of different things than you were when the problem was created. Does that make sense? I want lots of nodding, yes? Okay, now you can put your hand up at any point and stop me and ask a question. And at the end, there's a Q&A where I can do live coaching or just answer your questions, whatever serves you best. So when you're away from your partner, there are some benefits. It's not all bad. And we're going to talk about that in LDRs, so that's long distance relationships. And that's not always, of course, just because of lockdown. In an LDR, we get something called skin hunger. So it's not just loneliness and missing them. There's actually a research that's done that says skin hunger is more than loneliness, and it's a yearning for that physical touch. So Some Bright Spark has created pillows that when you hug the pillow, you have one each, the other person's pillow lights up. So it's a tangible form. Okay, it's like a second best cuddling. Now, of course, there are also plenty of more intimate devices that you can use in your distance relationship, which I'm not going to go into, but I'm sure that you've got an array of and an imagination. So we also need to talk about sex, because I sound like salt and pepper there, don't I? Of course, one of the things that brings a couple together is the intimacy of physical bonding. Now, of course, you can have sex and not be intimate. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody. But what we're looking at here is that bonding through a sexual intimacy. And that can be replaced by a whole host of things online, but it also has the propensity to be replaced by things like porn. So just be careful, and this tends to be more male dominated, but not exclusively. Do not think that porn is replacing the real thing. We've got a whole swathe of 18 to 50-year-olds who are pretty much impotent because of their addiction to porn. So just be mindful, and here we go back to that awareness. Now there's also something called sexual nostalgia, and that's where, because it's a long distance relationship, you're relying on memories of past sexual experiences. And the problem with that it becomes a fantasy. So again, just be careful. Of course, there's sexting, there's all sorts of sexual stuff you can get up to keep it exciting. Just be careful with putting anything that could get out there in the domain. When I was researching for today, I put in celebrity sex tapes. Little did I know that every celebrity sex tape is in one place. I have saved it, I'm not going to lie. There is everybody from Cardi B to Rihanna, and I mean unbelievably explicit. I mean, if you didn't know that and you're curious, ask me, I'll send you the link. But we're not Cardi B and we're not Rihanna, so we probably don't want any videos of us out there in the domain. So just be a little bit judicious. The other thing you can do in a long distance relationship is people want to feel, so the senses. So a handwritten letter, very old fashioned, but actually very romantic, and putting perfume on it, that kind of thing, because it's firing up another reminder of you, another sense. Holding something they've held, when they've written, they've poured some of their energy into that writing. So it can be incredibly evocative. Now, living apart also has benefits. I mean, one of my best friends lived apart from her boyfriend for 15, 18 years. Morning, Jen. And it gives you time in a set time of awareness from each other. It gives you time to reflect on what's really important to you, what matters in a relationship, who you've become. It gives you time to develop yourself. You know, sometimes we get lost in a relationship and in life. You know, life's busy and we focus on the other person. But don't forget to invest in yourself, invest in what you want, and to find out who you are and what you want. Because a lot of relationships go left field because the partners individually grow apart. They're not paying attention, there's that word again, to who they're becoming and what's important to them. And we are evolving all of the time, even if we don't realize it. It also gives us a time to work on our boundaries, and boundaries are hugely important in a relationship. I'm going to speak about them a little bit later on. Make sure that you know what your individual interests are. It's said that, you know, it's great to have shared hobbies, but it's really important to have separate hobbies too. You need to keep a sense of self. So in a long distance relationship, actually ring fence. This is our time. This is my time. That helps for anybody who likes a lot of certainty, likes clarity, and I'm certainly one of those people. So rather than spending the whole time missing him or her when you're not together, that's your opportunity for you time, having a romance with yourself, getting to know yourself, investing in yourself. Research also shows that a long-distance relationship becomes more idealized. You're not arguing over the washing up. You're not washing dirty socks. Therefore, it's much easier to keep it fresh. But if I'm really honest with you, not completely real. So just again, be aware of where that could trip you up. And remember, falling in love and staying in love are not the same thing. Some of us are very good at falling in love and not very good at staying in love. I'm one of them. Partly because we pick the wrong partners. And that's probably a subject for another day, but I want you to think about that. How do you stay fallen in love? It's something that we have to work at. It's not something that just happens naturally. As I mentioned earlier, the washing up, the dirty socks, they do get in the way of romance. And we've got an obligation, if we're going to have a great relationship, to not let that happen. We tend to forget about the little things that irritate us about the other person as well. If we haven't seen them for a while, we build up a fantasy in our head and we forget about the things that tick us off. Now what happens is we get together, and the next thing you know, you'll feel your heart sink. It's not quite as good as you remember it to be. And what that's telling you, don't judge it, what it's telling you is that you've built a fantasy and you've fallen in love with the fantasy, not the actuality. And I work a lot, one of my specialist or my signature pieces of work is love addiction. And that's the typical behavior of a love addict. So we've got a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I mean, you know, and it just keeps coming. We started with Brexit, we had COVID, we've had lockdown, now we've got riots and goodness knows what starting. And I'm sure that there's going to be much more. Why am I bringing that into a relationship conversation? Because if you feel uncertain, you are likely to feel stressed. And if you feel stressed, you are likely, if you're not conscious, to take that out on your partner. So notice when you feel stressed, how do you manage that? It's not your partner's job to absorb it. It's your job to manage it. And that's true of obviously your partner too. Couples and there are many couples that actually argue a lot, and that's how they build their intensity. So it starts off usually when we meet in couples who feed on intensity. It's usually highly sexual. You talk until 5 in the morning. You know everything about each other. I mean, you know, it's really deep and solid, I will say solid, deep and meaningful, not solid, but highly intense. The problem with that is it's unsustainable. So if it's unsustainable, what we then do is we replace that normally sexual intensity with arguments, okay? And we poke each other. So you'll know people that are constantly, and they might have 4 weeks where they're great, but then they have a fight from hell. What they're actually doing is they're feeding their need for intensity and they're normalizing it. And it's an incredibly exhausting way to conduct a relationship. We want to distinguish between a problem with the turbulence of life, the turbulence outside of our relationship, and what's going on in the relationship. It's very, very easy for those two things to merge. If there is turbulence externally, you need your relationship generally to be more solid, safe, and consistent than ever. If it's a smooth sea outside, then you can actually handle a bit more turbulence in the relationship. But very few people can handle and stay sane external and internal turbulence. So start to ask yourself, is this a problem in my relationship, or is this the turbulence from outside that's disturbing me or my partner, and therefore this is the impact? Are you working as a team or as two individuals? I work with a lot of couples. I work with them separately, and then every now and again we meet together. And one of the first things we want to look at is how you operate as a team. And there's lots of things you can do to identify that. But one of my favorites are vision boards. And my suggestion is that you each do a division board, a Freudian slip there, a vision board, but you do it separately. You don't do it together. So you go off into your various, the one in the bedroom, one in the lounge, and you create a vision board. And a vision board is a board with symbols, pictures, and words of things you want in your life. Things are important to you. You might not have them in your life at the moment, but you might want them. So supposing I wanted a house in Sandbanks, I would go onto Google, print out my perfect house and put it on my vision board. Supposing I wanted to rescue a few more dogs, then on a few more rescue dogs go. Supposing I wanted love in my life, I put some hearts and some lovely wording. And so your partner goes off and does that too. Now, when the two of you come back together, you may have the shock of your life or the delight of your life, but you're going to have some conversations and you're going to start to really see how you can start working together as a team, but also where your different aspirations might be. And it's not a problem. Your partner might want a home in Ibiza. You want a home in Sandbanks. How do you make those happen? Okay, so just because they're different doesn't mean they're bad. And I want to discourage you from seeing anything as good or bad. It either serves your relationship or it doesn't. It either helps it or it hurts it. Let's keep this very, very simple, but out of judgment. When you get creative, you go into the right brain. And the right brain is where emotions are. It's the touchy-feely stuff. So another reason that vision boards are good, it gets us to tap into what we really feel, what lights us up. And men are traditionally more left brain. They're more solution driven. They're more logical. And women are traditionally more nurturing and creative. Now, of course, there is no generalization. There are women who are incredibly left brain. There are men who are incredibly creative. But in order to give you an average, I'm going to make some generalizations, which I'd like you to prod about it. Excuse me. Another thing you can do that can be really good fun is to create lists. And again, you do these separately. So what are the 10 things on your bucket list? The 10 places that you want to go before you pop your clogs? What are the 5 restaurants that you are really, really keen to go on? What are the 5 things that your partner's done that have been the most impactful for you? And you write these lists at the same time, but separately. And then you come together, normally over a nice glass of something, and talk about them. And they open up a new dialogue. They open up. It's a really joyful way to learn about your partner. And let's be honest, when you spend a long time together, we can get a bit complacent. And very, very few people manage to stay out of complacency in a long-term relationship. And I'm talking years rather than months. So, it could be anything from your 10 sexual fantasies. I want to put a caveat on there. My suggestion is you start as a 3 or a 4. Don't go straight in with something that's absolutely crazy and you might scare them to death. So you might say to each other, okay, let's go in with our top 5 sexual fantasies that are a 0 to 5. And if we agree on those, then we'll do the 5 to 10s. Okay, I've seen some of those backfire, so just be gentle with each other. The favorite holidays you've ever had, the 5 most romantic things you've said to each other. Not only does that remind you of what's got you here, what's got you in the relationship, but it fires up the thing you want more of. And in that case, it would be romance, or it would be holidays, or going out to dinner. Okay, as I say, it's a really nice tool to use. So, of course, I've said it before, I'm going to say it a million times again. There is no going back to normal. Anybody who thinks we are is going in for a very, very rough ride. Not only is it not going to be normal, but we've only started to see how abnormal this new phase is. And I like to call it the brave new world. We've had an opportunity to pause. We've had an opportunity to realign. Some of you will realign your relationships in another direction. And what have we got there? Aldous Huxley. There we, brave new world. You couldn't make that up, could you? I don't know if you can all see that. But it is a brave new world, and we've got to make it our brave new world. And if you're doing that as a team, I can't think of a better opportunity than to review how you are going to navigate this brave new world, because you sure as hell ain't going to do it the way you got here. Okay. So 2 qualities are needed for any big change, and that is an ability to adapt and resilience. So if you're making notes, please make a note of those 2 qualities. Those are going to be your 2 major qualities, not only for a really good relationship, but also for navigating the brave new world, whether it's solo or as a couple. You've got an opportunity to rethink, rework, and rebuild with the COVID wisdom at the forefront. Nobody's coming out of COVID, this pandemic, the same person as they went in. It's pretty much impossible. What is it you've learned? How have you changed? What do you now know that's important to you that you didn't before? I mean, some of us are going to stay working from home. Some of us are going to change the way that we run our businesses. Some of us are going to change the way we conduct ourselves. I'm going to have white hair. I mean, all sorts of different angles that the pandemic has given us. Don't waste them. We've got such an amazing opportunity here, and it's an opportunity to thrive. Don't get bogged down with that negativity that's out there. You know, media thrives on sensationalism. They're going to talk about all the bad stuff, but trust me, there's such amazing opportunities if you stay conscious and aware. You know, it's clear. So be clear about who you want to be in this brave new world. What do you know about yourself that you didn't know? That's a really important question. Don't come out, don't leave this session today without knowing that. Now, communication is the key to every good relationship. And relationships that haven't got good communication, they're starved. I mean, some of them last, but they're rarely happy. Communication means you don't put off dealing with conflicts and resentments. If you feel like a victim, if you feel like, you know, oh, he always does that. Oh God, poor me. You've got an obligation to yourself to speak up. Tell your partner what it is that you want from a relationship, what you want from him or her. Don't expect people to guess. You know what? The chances of you being married to somebody with ESP are very slim. Tell them what you want. when we don't speak about the conflicts, when we dust them, push them under the carpet, when we are frightened because there's going to be a kickback, we're either going to be, we're going to be humiliated, we're going to be insulted, we're going to be made to feel there's something wrong with us if we speak up. You need to deal with that. That's not okay. And if it's you that does that, it's not okay either. It's not, we need to create an environment that is conducive to speaking up and speaking our truth in a really safe way. And remember that togetherness isn't always good and distance isn't always bad. We've got a real habit of going into that black and white. In some situations, it's really good to have a break, to have that long distance. And in other situations, it's much better to be close and snuggly. So see the positives and take the lessons from both. And you can hear I'm talking about taking lessons over and over again. That's what turns you into a wise person. Not whether you've made mistakes, it's the wisdom that you've taken out of them, the changes you've made as a result. So a few relationship disciplines that I thought you might like to hear. And there was a statement that came to me recently, and it was discipline weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. And I thought, what a truth, what a powerful statement that is. If we have self-discipline, we have the discipline of how we communicate, how we set boundaries, and we hold ourselves accountable. There's a lot of us, and I'm certainly guilty of this in previous relationships, we normalize certain negative, destructive behaviors. I'm going to come on to that more. So staying consciously aware, where do you put your partner's needs in your priority system? How much of a priority do you make your relationship? I work with couples who come to me, they're not having sex because they haven't got time and they're too stressed. They probably don't eat together because they're working long hours. They hardly ever go on a date night, and when they do, all they talk about is the children. How could you expect to have a really cool relationship, a really great relationship, if we don't invest? If we want a really good career, we invest in our career. We put time, we put energy, we learn and we grow. We've got to get real and know that that's what we have to do with relationships too. So remember that men tend to value feeling significant and women tend to value being heard. Again, it's a generalization, but it's a damn good one. I'm yet to find an exception to that rule. So what does significance mean? Have you ever noticed that when your partner thinks that he or she's made you happy, he's got a bit of a swagger? They often have that sort of after sex swagger as well when they feel really cocky, you know? It's a cocky walk. And women, when we've nurtured our partner. So women tend to be nurturers and listeners, and men are problem solvers. So when you go to your husband and you say, oh, I've had a really shitty day at work today and blah, 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 what you want him to do is hold the space so that you can just feel that he's listening and he's nodding and he's there with you. But you know what they're going to be doing? Almost certainly is they're going to be thinking of what they can say to solve the problem. That's not what you want. And this is where you've probably heard of the book Men Are From Mars, Women From Venus. And this is really a basic fact. So you need to explain to your partner this very, very simple truth, that when I tell you something that's going south in my life and I'm venting, I don't want you to solve it. I don't want you to give me a solution. I want you to be there. I want you to listen. I want you to stay present. And it's the other way around, you know, when a man is, whatever he's doing, he wants to feel significant. Another word for significant is important. The number one reason people split up is she doesn't feel heard, he doesn't feel significant. Write it down if you haven't. It's so crucial to any relationship. A relationship needs courage and vulnerability. It needs the courage to speak up and to make yourself vulnerable and be honest about who you are. And that works both ways. So tell the truth. Now, I'm not saying that there's not the odd little white lie. Does my bum look back big in this? No, darling, it looks fabulous. Sometimes it's just, you know when to be lovely, like kind. But for the most part, it's really important to be honest and to create that climate of understanding, of mutually wanting a communication platform that's safe. When your partner disappoints you, is that because you based your expectation of them on a fantasy rather than reality? Long time ago, it must have been about 7 years ago, I had a woman come to me and she was hysterical. And she sat in the chair and it had been her 50th birthday. And her husband hadn't pulled out all the stops. He'd bought her a box of chocolates, a bottle of champagne, and that was pretty much it. And she was absolutely inconsolable. And I said to her, what were you expecting? She said, all my friends have had a party. My best friend, he bought her a pair of Louboutins. This happened, that happened. And she was absolutely incensed, not just devastated. So I said, wow, that's great. I said, how long have you been with your partner? She said, 30 years. So you had 30 birthdays together? She said, yeah. I said, what does he do for you in the other 30 birthdays? She says, every year he buys me a box of chocolates and a bottle of champagne. Oh, wow. Why did you expect it would be different this year? And she literally went white. It dawned on her. He thought she loved that bottle of champagne and chocolates every year. He hadn't thought that it should be any different, and she hadn't thought to communicate. And this is the problem with disappointment. We get caught up in the feeling of disappointment. We should get caught up in the feeling of, what was I basing my expectation on? Because you can only be disappointed if you had an expectation, by the way. Okay, so am I basing my expectation on evidence of who this person is, on my history with them, or in the fantasy in my head that they're suddenly going to change? It really helps if you consider your partner's intention as being good. They've got the right intent. You know, that lady's husband was crestfallen when she was devastated and he had to sleep in the spare room for 3 months. And it took her that long to get over it, by the way, and to own her part in that dance. If we always come from the place that his or her intention was good, we're separating the emotion from, and also the story, from the reality. And in any healthy relationship, we must believe that that person wants to see the good in us. That person wants to do the best by us. They're going to screw up, they're human. Sometimes they're going to put their needs first. Sometimes they're just not going to think. But if we can rise above that and just check the intention, it's going to save you a lot of heartache. And I've seen relationships split up because of that simple truth. You want to have a climate of kindness and understanding. So when you screw up, your partner is seeing it through the lens of wanting to understand what happened, not to attack. If you've got a climate of blame and shame, you're on a downward slide to conscious or unconscious uncoupling. Okay, a climate of blame and shame. Is it better to be kind and wrong, or right and ugly? You know those arguments where you are turning into somebody you don't want to be, but you are going to get your point across and you are right. Really think about how much investment you put on being right rather than understanding that other person's point of view. Separate the behavior from the person. So if I do something that's upset my partner, let's talk about the behavior. It's not me, it was my behavior. Does that make sense? It's an important factor as a parent too. You know, I absolutely adore you, but when you didn't take the bin out last night, it really pissed me off. Can you hear the difference? Not, what's the matter with you? You never think about me. You never wouldn't even take the bin out. I've been homeschooling the kids for 3 months, blah, 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 blah. That's going to go nowhere. But you know how much I love you. And it just really hurt me when you didn't take the bin out. What went on? Can you see how you're going to open each other up? You're going to create a climate of wanting to understand and a much deeper, healthy relationship. What needs were met when they did this thing, by the way? So part of understanding is understanding what needs a behavior is meeting. So if I constantly don't take the bin out for you, what's going on there? What need am I? Is it because I unconsciously feel like you're skivvy? That's quite possible. Is it because we've got a cleaner or a housekeeper and it's their job and I'm paying the money? Find out. It's not just because they don't want to take the bin out. There's something going on. Human beings always have a why. They might not know what the why is, but with this, with the model I'm giving you, you can actually keep understanding the why and getting closer and closer and closer. Anger is almost always my needs aren't being met at some level. Whenever you get angry or they get angry, just ask yourself or ask them what needs weren't met. You'll diffuse the situation. What we tend to do is someone gets angry with us, we get defensive, we get angry back. And you know, I mean, unless you are bored and you need a fight, or you're lacking intensity and you need a fight, there's no point in doing it. We have got some relationships where it's the only time that people speak their truth is when they're angry, when they're really angry, and it can be quite abusive. The problem with that is we're then going to have a shame attack, and we're then associating speaking my truth with not being a person I like. So I come back full circle. Speak your truth from a place of kindness and respect and love. If it's hysterical, it's historical. Okay? Some of you know that phrase from me very, very well. If you are behaving in a way that is over and above what that particular situation calls for, it's almost always childhood wound that's showing up. Okay, now you might think it was from your last relationship, but your last relationship wound goes back to childhood. So just shortcut the process, go straight back to childhood. So you didn't put the bin out for me, which is fairly innocuous. I go hysterical, I go absolutely crazy. Actually, it's because I don't feel I matter. And that goes back to my childhood. And my job is really important. It is my job to know what my triggers are. And a trigger is a signpost that says you've got work to do. Don't try and avoid triggers. Bring them on. If I'm triggered, that's where my work needs to be. I've got a wound that needs to be healing. And again, you know, triggering. We did a session. I think it was last session, wasn't it, Rach? We did the wonderful thing about triggers. So that's up on the YouTube channel if you want that. Numbing and boredom. Okay, be careful you're not numbing out boredom in your relationship. And whether that's with gaming or booze or porn or being busy, it's a very popular and common behavior rather than dealing with the issue. And the chances are that somebody's going to play offside if your relationship, if you run that pattern, the chances are very high of an offside relationship. So TV is also a number, by the way. If you find that you watch copious amounts of TV with your partner, you're not intimate, you're not really together. Now, that's not the same as sitting down and watching a couple of hours here and there, but if that's one of your numbings, be careful. Tackle the cause, not the symptom. The numbing is a symptom, it's not a cause. So don't blame it on the telly. The telly is just a tool, that's all. Everybody's still with me? Can I have some nods? Good, thank you. Be aware of the language you use and the tone in which you speak. And again, we normalize this. If somebody pisses us off, we adopt this tone, okay? So what we say in that tone of voice is actually pretty irrelevant because it's the tone of voice the other person is feeling. And 47% of all communication is based on tone, not words. Only 7% are words, which is quite incredible. Remember that when something has deep emotion attached to it, we remember it for years. So do you know why you remember the fact that, I don't know, you had that really crazy row about 20 years ago and he said that your bum looked big or whatever it was? It's because there was a deep emotion attached to it. So to give you an example of this, if I asked you, what you were doing on the 11th of September last year, would you be able to tell me? Anybody remember what they were doing? No. But if I said to you, what were you doing on the 11th of September 2001, 9/11, everybody remember? Yeah. Do you know why? It's because the impact emotionally that had on you. So those of us who are old enough, and I think it is only me, will all remember what we were doing when Elvis Presley died. That was a massive moment as well. So remember, when there is deep emotion attached to any conversation, any event with you and your partner, you're going to remember it for years because of the emotion it has attached to it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing to keep bringing it up, but start to look at that. It's going to help you. Never, ever, ever, and I rarely say never, threaten to end a relationship unless you mean it. Every time you do that, the unconscious mind loses a thread of trust and safety. Therefore, what happens is that the unconscious mind now believes that you are going to abandon me. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be 20 years or 20 minutes. And the unconscious mind doesn't care because you are now not safe. And that means that your partner will treat you in a way of somebody who is not safe. It's the one rule. I mean, relationships are trigger fests. Anybody going into a new relationship often book me and book their partner into sessions for that reason. An existing relationship, do not ever threaten to leave unless you are serious. You will do untold damage that you can never, ever repair. Once you've said those words, your partner will never, ever forget. And remember, I talked about the impact that 9/11 had on you 20 years later, you still remember. When you tell somebody you're going to leave and it's the end, that stays with them in their neurology. And you know that because it's happened to you. You will never, ever trust that person the same way. Sometimes we give situations and events a meaning that wasn't there. Be careful with that because that's something that can be really corrosive. You don't take the bin out because you don't care about me. You think I'm your skivvy. Can you see how I'm taking an event, an action, and I am then putting a meaning. I'm making up a story of the meaning. And human beings operate with meaning, okay? Everything we do, pretty much we associate a meaning to. So it would be really helpful for you to understand what meaning you're putting. Let's say my partner watches television all the time. Well, that's because he's not interested in me. Hear the meaning? It might be that that's how he sees. He's probably numbing, actually. So my better question for me would be, what is it that he needs to numb from? What's going on there? Is he aware of that? Focus on the magic. And if you haven't got magic in your relationship, either make some or leave. It's your birthright. Relationships should be joyous. They're going to have ups and downs. There's going to be times where you want to kill each other. But there needs to be magic. And if there's not, ask yourself why you're still there. Take the time to review and appreciate every magic moment you have together. Because what we tend to do is we tend to take each other for granted, as I mentioned earlier. And that means we take the good times for granted. We feast on the bad, but we take the good times for granted. One of the things that I would invite you to do is to have a journal. And in that journal, every night, you write down at least one thing that was magical between you today. Something, it might have been a moment where you laughed, it might have been an intimate connection, it might be they did something, it could be anything. When you what you focus on, you get more of. So, you know, have you ever noticed, perhaps with an ex-boyfriend, when they started to irritate you and you suddenly noticed that they picked their earwax? That was it. Every time. You cannot get that out of you. You are just waiting for it to happen. Yeah? What you focus on magnifies. So if you focus on the good stuff, if you focus on the magic between you, even if at the beginning it is tiny, it will grow. If you're focusing on the irritations, they're going to grow too. But my suggestion is that within reason, you discuss the irritations and just work out if you're being reasonable. I've got a friend that when she's grumpy, her husband's breathing irritates her. I think you'll agree that one, you know, she's got to take the rap for that one. Remember your common goals. I talked earlier about that vision boarding, which I still think is it's a wonderful idea. How often do you check what you want, how you want your relationship to be, feel, and look? What do you want out of your relationship? How much space do you want? How much closeness do you want? How is it time for you to find a hobby together or apart? Because of our crazy schedules, because of complacency, because of unconsciousness, we tend not to do that. And I recommend every couple, at least every 6 months, at least, has a conscious conversation. Where are we going? How are we getting there? Where's our best teamwork? Where are we a bit weak and wobbly in the team? What's our dream? What do we do? Where are we heading together? What are we each contributing to that? You are constantly evolving. Your relationship is constantly evolving. It won't always be in the right direction. It won't always be in the direction that you want it to be. By having an audit, a 6-monthly audit, you'll pick that up much, much quicker than just letting it go. What do you do to make each other feel loved? Being loved and feeling loved are not the same thing. Let me say that again. Being loved and feeling loved are not the same thing. Now I'm going to go into the love languages in a moment, and I'll expand on that. But I want you to be aware what makes you think that you are loved and what makes you feel like you're loved. You know, it's the old joke. I don't know if I'm allowed to say things like this anymore, but hey, I'm going to. It's the Aussie bloke that comes home to his wife and she says, "Do you love me?" And he says, "Yeah, of course I love you. I shag you every night." And yes, I've gone for a stereotype there, but actually those exist. He thinks that by shagging her, she feels loved. She doesn't. So just think about where that, not necessarily that particular example shows up, but where it shows up in your relationship. How do you make your partner feel loved? And what does he or she do to make you feel loved? Now, in order to feel loved, we normally need to feel accepted, and that is the full rainbow of our selves. And that means we've got 3,365 human traits, I believe. All of those you own. And with each one of those comes another rainbow of your personality. And being accepted means I accept all of that. I might not like you when you're stressed and irritated, but I accept you. And there's a difference. Feeling valued. How do you demonstrate that you value your partner? You cannot stay out of taking someone for granted if you do not show value. How do you appreciate them? And how do you feel appreciated? And how do you feel known? It's very important they get you. If your partner doesn't get you, you don't have intimacy. And if you don't have intimacy, you've got it's going to be a difficult relationship. Now, that's not the same as a peaceful coexistence. Some people settle for being with somebody because it's less trouble than not being with somebody. There are lots of those. And they have this unwritten contract that you do your thing, I do my thing, and we kind of meet in the middle to watch a bit of TV here and there. That is what we call a generally peaceful coexistence. It's not a relationship or an intimate relationship. It's stable at the surface, much because of indifference, but underneath it lacks the depth of emotion and intimacy, and you would expect the partners to need to numb. And you know my list of that. So if we've got excess drinking, drugging, TV, working, being busy, blah, 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 have a look. Are you in one of those coexistences rather than a coupling? So we've talked about falling in love versus staying in love, okay? Now, one of the things that is rarely talked about, and this is a sexist issue, is that men are generally brought up to believe that they give their best outside of the home. Most men believe that they should give everything pretty much to their work. And it was a real shock throughout the world when President Obama showed up and he stopped work at 5 o'clock every day, went and had dinner with his daughters and his wife, and then he went back to work at 8 o'clock. He took 3 hours off, pretty much whatever was going on in the world. And he really started to get people questioning that this patriarchal belief that a man comes in who has, he's worked himself to a frazzle, he's stressed, I've had to run a business, and we've all heard those reasons. Now, of course, this happens with women as well. It tends to be more indoctrinated to men. And what I would do, I really would recommend that you take this information and talk to your partner about it if it impacts you. Because in order to stay in love, rather than fall in love, to stay in love, we need to invest in the relationship. And if what you're getting are the leftover crumbs because he gives his loaf, if you like, at work, at business, in sport, normally business, then you are shortchanging yourself. The problem is that it has been normalized. And, we look at them and it's the breadwinner. And as I say, this can work the other way around. But if anybody is so intent in giving everything outside of the relationship and bringing home what is left, good luck with that one. Because you're telling your partner on every level that they are not top of the pile. Now, that doesn't mean that you sit there holding hands 40 hours a day, 40 hours a week. But it is an important factor that must be discussed and brought into a relationship. So, be open to change if you don't want boredom. And here comes the dichotomy. Most of us don't like change. We like what we know, but we hate being bored. And then we wonder why we get ourselves in a pickle. So back to my word, conscious. How about on date night, you make it a given that you're going to discuss conscious change. You've got to shake things up, and not just in the bedroom. If you don't shake things up, you're going to get into a routine. And if you become too routine, then what's going to happen is that you lose spontaneity. If you lose spontaneity, you can predict each other to literally 99 times out of 100, you're going to struggle with that. somewhere down the line, somebody's going to want something fresh and new. We want you to grow together. We don't want you to grow apart, but any long-term relationship, particularly if you're into personal growth, you can expect some of that, okay? We're not all going to grow at the same point. And the successful marriages, the couples that have been together 50, 60 years, what you'll see is that every single couple I've spoken to, and a lot, it's been something I've researched quite heavily, what they've done is that they have accepted that there's going to be some of this during that path of a lifetime together. And most of us, our ambition is to have a life partner. So just to finish off, I want to talk to you about love languages. And this is taken from a book by Gary Chapman. If you haven't yet made yourself familiar with love languages, please do. They're not just in romantic relationships, they're in friendships, family relationships, but it is a very, very good shorthand into how to give yourself the very, very best chance of a great relationship. So Gary Chapman talks about a love tank. When I first heard that, I've got to say I did cringe. It's very American, but actually when you think about it, it's your emotional gas tank. If we're running on empty, if our partner is not filling our love tank, and we're responsible for that, by the way, this isn't just it's all his or her job. If we're running on an empty love tank, you're not going to have a great relationship. You're going to feel taken for granted. You're going to get resentful, and some negative patterns will ensue. So your gas tank needs to be full of how much love you feel. And I've already run through some of the ways that we feel loved, not just know we're loved, but feel loved. But actually, the way that we feel loved changes because different people have different language. And Gary Chapman has brought 5 of those languages to the table, and they pretty much cover everybody. So the first one, the first love language is affirmation, and that's words of affirmation, and that's encouragement. You know, when you're having a really shitty time, does your partner encourage you? Come on, you can do this. I know it's bad at the moment, but it's going to pass. Approval. We want to be approved by our partner. If our partner is criticizing us, it's going to empty the love tank. How do you receive approval and give approval to your partner? Appreciation. Very few relationships will thrive without appreciation. How do you receive appreciation? How do you give appreciation? So those are all words of affirmation. The next one is quality time. Now, some partners don't care about what you say. What they care about, quality time is my #1 love language. You can tell me I'm beautiful and that you want to spend time with me and that we're going to go to the Bahamas together as much as you like. If you don't spend quality time with me, if you're not present, if you're distracted, then you're not filling my love tank. So quality time is time where you are fully present. I'm just going to repeat that. That means you're not looking at the phone, you're not stroking the dog, you're not watching the TV, you are absolutely in that person's zone. You are paying attention. You are showing up for them fully, okay? Really important, and it is becoming increasingly difficult in this day and age. Meaningful talks, you know, when you go out on date night, which should be quality time, as I say, if all you're doing is talking about the kids the whole time, that's not really quality. You're not investing in a relationship, you're investing in your parenthood. Don't confuse the two. Meaningful talks, talking about all sorts of things, whether it's the universe or how telephones work or things that they're curious about, rather than, you know, the family or what we're going to do this Christmas. And be careful of future planning. Some people get lost, and I know couples that are constantly spending their time on planning. And what's happening is you're missing the moment. You're not squeezing the juice of joy out of the current moment. Nothing wrong, of course, with planning a fabulous holiday or whatever you're going to do at Christmas, but make sure that you are really present for the good stuff and the bad stuff, because the bad stuff is where you're going to learn and grow. Make sure that you're doing that too. Sharing activities. If you both love to cycle or swim or play Scrabble, whatever it is. And as I say, being fully present, that's hugely important. So that's quality time. Number 3 are gifts. Now, nobody loves a present more than me, particularly if it's wrapped in a Tiffany bow. However, as I said before, you can give me the Tiffany parcel, but if you don't spend quality time with me, if you don't know who I am, it means nothing. It's just something your secretary's probably organised. It means a gift could be something handmade. It could be you've baked them a cake. It could be he's made you your favourite cocktail. It's not always going to be expensive and extravagant. Many, many people, their highest love language is gifts. If it's always needing to be a high value gift, by the way, question it. That may be a substitute for something else. Number 4 are acts of service. Acts of service. I emptied the dishwasher for you, darling. I took the bin out. I ironed your shirt. That does nothing for me whatsoever. But for somebody else, it will fill their love tank for days. And remember, there's no right or wrong with your love language. Just understand it and understand your partners too. Number 5 is physical touch. And this is the last love language. And that could be hugging, stroking, kissing, massage, just when you're watching TV, holding hands. Or it could be full-blown chandelier shaking sex. You can go the full remit. But get to know what's important to you. And love languages rarely change, by the way. It's quite interesting. Our love language tends to stay consistent from partner to partner. But that's something that you can just check in your history. So that's me for today, and I hope that this has been interesting. I hope you've learned some things. I hope you've remembered some things. I hope I've inspired you and motivated you to look at your connection with your relationship, what you're putting in and what you're taking out, and make sure that it is aligned with what you want. So thank you. If you've got any questions, anything I can coach you on, I'm right here. Who's going to go first? Sasha?
I have a lot to work on.
Oh, don't we all?
That's all I need to say.
Don't we all?
But a lot of very valid points, but I think I need to go away and digest it, and possibly poke the bear a little bit, and put him to the test. He's a very stubborn man. He's actually snoring next door, so he can't hear me.
Okay. Well, why don't you show him this video another time? Go for it together.
Oh God, can you imagine, Rachel? Can you imagine? He'd probably never speak to me ever again.
Wow.
Bye.
Sue, you looked like you had a question. Sue up there, did you have something to say? Could you unmute Sue, Rach, please? Thanks. No, I can't hear you. Sorry, darling. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I'm all ears now.
Okay. I must have had a big question mark over my head because I wasn't really going to say anything, but I have somebody in my life that is in an abusive relationship, and she hasn't got the tools to. She's young, so she hasn't got the tools to know how to deal with it. There's subjects that need to be discussed that she can't discuss with this person. It's her dad, and so I was thinking, I wonder if I could book an appointment for her to talk to you. That was the question mark over my head. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So thank you. The first thing is that I'm very nervous about taking an appointment via somebody, and I'll tell you why. This work is hard. Okay, anybody on the path will tell you this is not. It might sound hippie la la, Sue. It's not. It's you've got to show up, and you've really got to want the change. So that's I interview everybody before I work with them, and so that's the prerequisite, is that you've got to really want it, and you've got to be prepared to do your homework. And if they're up for that, and once I speak to somebody in what we call discovery call, then I can also give a prognosis of, it might be that they need 30-minute sessions, or one big 90-minute, or they need a whole program. Now, the thing with abuse in a relationship is that it's not coincidental. Abuse in any relationship comes back from self-esteem. We only allow what we believe we deserve. So we could focus on the abusive relationship, but very rarely is that the core issue. And I've worked with way over 1,000 people now, and I've assisted many people out of an abusive relationship, and not often, sometimes they will find another to replace it. So supposing they've got an abusive relationship with their son, they will then, and we sort that out, they'll then go and find an abusive partner. Now, the reason being is that there was abuse in the childhood, and the unconscious mind seeks out what is familiar. So abusive relationships are quite complex. There's a lot of different threads, but absolutely. My details, Michelle Zelli at, what is it? What am I?
What your email address?
Yeah.
Is
MZ999.
mz999@me.com.
Thank you. Sorry, I had a moment there. Okay.
Thank you.
You're very.
I'll email you. Yeah.
So I can ping you Michelle's details over. Some of the sessions that we have done previously as well are on our YouTube channel. So you might want her to have a look at that first before, because like Michelle says, I guess it's got to be something that she wants to do herself. And
yeah. Also, I've got a YouTube channel, and so all of these go up on there, but also the lives I do with other people. So there's a real widespread, and that there's about an average of 2 new videos go up a week. So if you subscribe, you'll just get a little ping that tells you. I don't run a mailing list. I don't email you information and what have you. I'm a no-sell zone, so please don't worry about that. You'll just get a ping when something goes up. Anybody else with any feedback, questions, anything I can help you? Yes, hello, Linda.
I just thought there's one word I think is extremely helpful in relationship building and in life in general, and that's gratitude. I think if you can build a sense of gratitude, then I think you can solve an awful lot of problems. Do you think, I mean, this isn't everybody by any means, but sometimes the solution to the problems we have is to be grateful for some of the things we have, but also start thinking about some of the big picture projects that we can be involved in. I know you've said that people are sometimes too busy to have a good relationship, but I think the truth is a lot of people aren't busy enough. I don't think they manage the time properly, and I don't think they think about some useful extra projects that could build this sense of gratitude and a sense of their position in the wider world. Do you think that there's something in that?
Yeah, I think that basically we're talking semantics here. I use the word appreciation, and appreciation and gratitude, I think there's very little. Would you agree that they're pretty much on the same?
Yeah, there's a different emphasis, I think, there. There is.
What do you think? What's the distinction to you?
I think that gratitude is a bigger word than appreciation. I think appreciation would be about an event or a place or or a moment in time, whereas I think gratitude is a broader sense of who you are and where you are in the world.
Okay. So, and you see, this is a typical communication issue, because if you were my partner, I would be blown away by that, because I find the word gratitude a little bit demeaning. I'm not grateful for you, but I appreciate you. I really appreciate so much about you.
I wouldn't attach gratitude necessarily to a person. I'm talking about.
And that's okay. So there's another. But can you see, just opening this up, how we've been able to make these distinctions that in an intimate relationship that could actually end up going south.
Yeah, and that's my world. I am a communications consultant, so I try to be very specific.
Yeah, sure. And I think as far as big projects, again, I'd go back to my vision board idea. That's the entire basis of it. So making sure that you are both you finding things that you're passionate about, that you're driving together towards, for sure. But I think it's very important that whilst we're doing that, that we don't infatuate with the future at a cost to the present. And I do agree that you know, as far as time goes, I don't know about managing time so much as being unconscious. We waste time. We say, well, I haven't got time to blah, but I've got time to watch 8 episodes of Games of Thrones. You know, it's we make time for what's important to us. It's as simple as that. And therefore, I think the emphasis needs to be on being conscious. What do I invest my energy, my time, my thought, my passion into? And if my relationship isn't up there as a priority, it is going to dwindle, Linda. I think you're absolutely right. We need to have some shared passions to keep it alive, keep it fresh. And the vision boarding and sort of a 6-monthly real sort of go away somewhere lovely. I mean, these are the days before lockdown. You know, a lot of my clients will book into a really lovely place for a weekend every 6 months, and it's a relationship review. And just checking on those, you know, where are we going? What are we dreaming of? Are we sharing those dreams? Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't know that I had a question. I think I sort of had an observation. So it's kind of interesting for me to get your feedback on your position, because that's because I like to hear things that are different to the way I think.
Thank you.
It's good. It's good to listen to. I think the whole thrust of your presentation was right, absolutely right. I just thought that I would add a couple of things, couple of observations that I had. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, JC.
Thank you so much for the time. It was nice to be able to join you. And actually, you do the talking.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it, thank you. There were a few things that, again, I think there were observations or just reflection points. I really connected when you said that one of the definitions of intimacy is someone getting you. You know, just it's being got. Terrible language, Linda, but you know, and then how that relates to how different feeling loved and being loved is. I think they're so directly related, because you can be loved and adored and be supported, but feeling loved really can be that essence of someone just getting you. And I think, you know, I know that I can be quite an abstract individual, and often people don't necessarily get me but might love me, and yeah, that really connected with me, so thank you. And was there anything else that I was thinking about? Oh, the Einstein point. Is there anything that you would say? Obviously it's always doing the work, but often it can be a really proactive, quite challenging change in consciousness, to be always trying to see a different solution to everything that you come across. Obviously it's about asking ourselves those questions, you know, what have we learned, where are we at right now? But is there anything else that you can?
No, is it raising your consciousness will make that happen automatically. So you cannot, once you've learned something, you can't unlearn it. So all of the work that we do is designed to raise our consciousness. Now, if we then add in changing our vibe, and that, for those of you that don't know me, that means you change your frequency, what you give off, if you like, your energy, and that depends, our energy depends on what we put into ourselves, so thoughts, food, environment, etc. So if we raise our consciousness, our awareness, we're able to see differently. And the analogy that I'd give you is, if you've been living in a bungalow and for 10 years, and then I move you to the penthouse of a 17-story building next door, you're going to have a completely different vista. It's going to be unrecognizable. That's what conscious growth does. So just keep on raising your consciousness. And I know for a fact, you know, obviously working together, I know for a fact how good you are at that. So you know, and that you asked the question is typical of you wanting to reach that little bit further. But just keep on going up the lift, keep going up the stairs.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, JC.
Michelle, what would you say for, you know, anyone that wasn't sure, you know, talking about that raising your conscious awareness, like what would you say are the best things that people could do to, I know it's quite an individual thing and it's probably a bit of a broad question, but just to get,
well, that's what I do with people.
To think about.
When somebody comes to me, that's what I do. I don't sit there and say, right, what you pay me to do is raise your consciousness, because most people wouldn't have a clue what the value was. But actually, every time I ask a question that feels uncomfortable and you open up. So, you know, raising the consciousness is with learning. What do I know about me? Because once I know something about myself, I can't unlearn it. It's impossible, okay? So once I know something about another person, once I understand a different thing about life, once I understand a different thing about the way the universe works, they're changing your consciousness. And of course, once you've gone up one level, you've got new tools, you've got new resources at your disposal. So guess what? And the other thing that's really interesting about consciousness is I've never met anybody who does consciousness awareness work. And most people, by the way, have no idea that's what they're doing with me at the beginning. I've never met anybody that regrets it or stops it. Once you're on the path to conscious change or conscious growth, it's so exciting and exhilarating. It just becomes, I was going to say a hobby, it's a bit more than a hobby, because you take such responsibility for your own life, what shows up in your life, how you process it, how you feel, your relationships. And I guess one of the things that I would suggest is that you go outside your comfort zone with what you watch, listen to. I mean, I rarely watch mainstream TV. I tend to spend a lot of time on YouTube. I did 29 hours book studying last month. I know that because Audible just sent me my account. You know, read, listen. Audible is fantastic if you haven't got an account with them. You can go on your walk or run or whatever you do. I walk about 8 miles a day, and that means I get to listen to 90 minutes of a book. And you can put bookmarks in and all sorts. But your consciousness is your awareness, and your awareness is what you know. And what you know depends on what you feed yourself and the questions you ask yourself as well. And get a coach. I mean, I'm not shouting for business. I promise you, I've got more than enough, but get yourself a really good coach that asks you questions that challenge you, that open you up.
I just have a little thing to say. Has anyone watched White Lines on Netflix? It's a drama, but sometimes drama can give you a really good insight into different relationships. And it's really, on the surface of it, it's about drug dealing in Ibiza, but actually it's about the central relationship.
Right up your street, Zelli.
It does. I'm going to watch that tonight. Thank you.
About the central relationship of the girl, Zoe, and how she's in one relationship, but she finds another relationship, and one makes her feel that way and one makes her feel the other way. So from your point of view, it is very interesting. But the second point I wanted to make was, I've been a journalist since I was very, very young. And one of the things I've noticed when I interview people, and I've interviewed rape victims, I've interviewed women who've been damaged, I've interviewed men who've been bullied, all of that sort of stuff. And there's one thing that people do, which I think is very important, men and women, but a lot of women permit certain things. And they permit and permit and permit and permit to kind of grease the wheels of that relationship, to oil it going forward so that it holds together. And I think the point you're making here as well is that once you start to read books, once you start to listen to interviews, or maybe watch a key drama, you start to think to yourself, actually, why am I permitting that? And the problem is, once you pass that point and you stop permitting, you then start having to change. And that's what you're saying, I think, is that you cannot go back. There's no way back once you've sorted that point out.
You're absolutely right. And normally the permitting is based on what we believe we deserve. So I can tell somebody's self-esteem by the quality of their relationship.
Yeah.
And there's a great meme out there that says, you can tell my mental history by the timeline of my partners. And it's true. You know, you can see somebody's growth in how they allow themselves to be treated. And it is allow ourselves to be treated.
And can I just say, the other point is, last week I did a presentation for the Girls Friendly Society, and I was asked to do something about building assertiveness and resilience in very, very young girls, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Wow.
And I can remember interviewing one of the great addiction experts in the UK, Dr. Robin Lefebvre, who ran the Promise Clinic in Kensington, an excellent, excellent doctor and addiction specialist. And he nearly didn't talk to me because he thought I worked for ITV, and ITV was a kind of, you know, like tabloid TV, etc., etc. And I said, look, I want to do this interview because I want to find out some stuff. I've got a 2-year-old daughter at the time. This is a long time ago. And he said, okay, let's sit down and we'll talk. He said, because frankly, by the time she's 4, it's game over. For most people, your influence on her is in those 4 years. After that, it's teachers, peers, people, da-da-da-da-da-da. But the grains of resilience are sown then, and confidence. Because without resilience and assertiveness, not aggression, assertiveness and confidence, and not knowing who you are, leaves you open to any kind of physical or mental manipulation or bullying later on. And once you've opened the door to that behaviour, it's like opening the door to enlightenment or to any other kind of learning. Once you've opened the door to that bad, negative stuff, it gets a hold. It's a little bit like the old coronavirus with its little hooks and spikes. It goes in there and it stays in there, and it's very hard to get out.
Yeah, and you know what we're doing there is we're reinforcing what we believe we deserve. It becomes corrosive.
Or don't deserve, or we believe we don't deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So, on that note, can I go to the beach?
Yeah.
Gosh, been a long one today, huh? Been lovely to see you all. Do you want to say something, Sue?
Where are you going, Michelle?
I'm going to the beach.
What beach?
The beach that I live on.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah, I moved out, and one of the lovely things about Corona was I jumped out of London, and I've had a little beach place for a while, and I've moved down here lock, stock and barrel. So, yeah, over the moon.
Thanks, Zelli.
It's my pleasure. We shall be
Thank
back
you.
in 2 weeks' time. Rachel will throw a subject at me and I'll weave a bit of magic for you all. Lovely to see you all. Have a great weekend. And as I say, please, if you want to tag me on Instagram and keep hold of me there, please do. I'd love to see you.